Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello with your Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report. We're taking you across the Great Plains into key federal districts nationwide, from Montana to Texas, bringing you the latest courtroom developments, sentencing outcomes, and federal enforcement actions shaping communities right now. We begin tonight in Montana, where multiple federal cases highlight crimes involving exploitation, deception, and narcotic trafficking. A popular man, Benjamin George Walking Eagle Sr., 40, has pled guilty to transferring obscene material to a minor. Federal investigators say the case began in October of 2023 after a 14-year-old victim reported receiving explicit messages and images via social media. Walking Eagle later admitted to FBI he sent at least one explicit image. He now faces up to 10 years in federal prison, with sentencing scheduled for August 12th of 2026. He remains released under conditions pending that hearing. In a separate case, a Browning attorney, Nathan Nicholas Johnson St. Goddard, 45, has been sentenced to 4 years of probation and fined $100,000 after a jury found he made false statements during a sexual assault investigation. Federal prosecutors say St. Goddard misrepresented his interaction with the victim during a recorded interview, despite knowing he had engaged in sexual contact. And in Billings, a Round Top man, Billy Lee Walker, 61, has been sentenced to 10 years in prison after admitting to illicit sexual conduct overseas. Authorities say Walker, while teaching in Thailand, groomed a teenage student and paid for explicit material. Investigators recovered digital evidence confirming that exploitation. And in a major narcotic case, two Helene brothers, Austin Hagman, 36, and Michael Hagman, 40, have been sentenced to more than a decade in federal prison for trafficking methamphetamine and fentanyl. Authorities intercepted shipments, executed search warrants, and seized drugs, firearms, and nearly $40,000 in cash. Both men admitted to distributing narcotics across the region. In Wyoming, a Casper man, Derek A. Fulfer, 431, has been sentenced to just over 1 year in federal prison for making anti-Semitic threats. Prosecutors say Fulfer made multiple threatening calls targeting Jewish organizations across state lines. He later admitted to calls but claimed that they were protected speech, a claim rejected by federal court. Meanwhile, federal officials are making National Child Abuse Prevention Month, emphasizing early intervention and community responsibility to protecting children. In South Dakota, federal prosecutors continue to dismantle a multiple state drug trafficking operation. A Los Angeles man, DeJohn Kroom, 43, has been sentenced to more than 23 years in prison for conspiracy to distribute controlled substance and money laundering. Authorities say he played a managerial role, transferring meth and fentanyl from the West Coast to Sussex Falls. And in a related case, a Sussex Falls woman, Alicia Bennox, 32, has been sentenced to 10 years in federal prison after admitting to distributing 500 grams of methamphetamine and operated a stash house for that organization. In Nebraska, a Mexican national, Brian Alexis Baldando Molantes, has been charged with unlawful possession of a firearm while in the United States illegally. Authorities say the case stemmed from a social media video showing a juvenile firing a rifle into the air. Investigators recovered the weapon and linked Belmontes to the incident. He remains in federal custody. In Colorado, a former Loveland police officer, Dylan Miller, 30, has been sentenced to 17 years in federal prison for sexually assaulting a minor while on duty. Federal prosecutors say Miller abused his authority, isolating the victim before committing the assault in a public park. In Oklahoma, a federal jury has convicted Anthony Michael Leon, 44, for failing to register as a sex offender after evading authorities for more than a decade. Investigators say Leon staged a crime scene in 2012 and lived under false identities across multiple states before being captured in New York in 2025. And in a separate case, a convicted offender, Jimothy McGirt, 77, has been sentenced to a combined 45 months in prison for failing to register and violating supervised release conditions tied to prior convictions involving a minor. In Texas, federal authorities report hundreds of new criminal cases tied to border enforcement efforts. Under Operation Take Back America, more than 440 individuals have been charged in a single week, including illegal re-entry, human smuggling, and firearm offenses. Among those cases, a Houston man convicted of drug trafficking and firearm offenses after operating out of a motel. A cartel-linked driver sentenced to life in prison after transporting fentanyl capable of producing over 2 million lethal doses. A repeat human smuggler sentenced after recruiting a minor into a dangerous trafficking operation. And a Cypress man sentenced to 45 years for exploiting dozens of minors online. In Louisiana, a Texas man has been sentenced to more than 5 years for cocaine trafficking. A convicted felon faces up to 15 years after being indicted for firearm possession. A previously deported individual has been charged with illegal entry, and a Jefferson Parish woman has been sentenced to 70 months for fraud and identity theft, totaling more than $350,000. Also in New Orleans, a 21-year-old man has pled guilty to drug trafficking and possession of a firearm in furtherance of that crime. Sentencing is scheduled for August. From exploitation cases to major narcotic operation and long-running fugitive investigations, federal courts across the country continue to prosecute crimes with far-reaching impact. For continued coverage and full case breakdowns, stay with Englebrook Independent News. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, reporting from the Federal Crime Desk, where facts matter and justice is followed at every step of the way. Good night.